A little company called Apple is probably going to be making some news today with a new product, maybe the third iteration of its iPad. And they've also been in the spotlight for the manufacturing of such devices. And Richard's been doing a deep dive on this issue and come up with some interesting things. I mean, what exactly?
Well, I mean, here's the first thing. I think sometimes this doesn't get covered fairly. I mean, Apple is far from the worst, even in its industry, as far as treatment of the people who work in the factories of its suppliers are concerned.
There's a big hoo-ha over what's been going on in Foxconn, the conditions of the workers
and elsewhere in China,
making iPads and other Apple devices.
Right. So Apple's by far from the worst, and electronics is actually far better than other sectors like toys and garments. But it's not good enough. At least if you're Apple, company's worth half a trillion dollars. It has $100 billion of cash in the bank. The brand's been valued last year at $150 billion globally. It's probably not enough, as it wasn't for Nike.
They have to be held to a higher standard.
It's not
the
enough
same way that
better.
Nike really was.
It's not enough to be better than the others. You've got to be seen to be objectively good at looking after the workers.
It's also hard for Tim Cook to get up there and say, well, we shouldn't pay these people a couple extra cents a day when he's making a couple $100 million.
Well, he was also just awarded $376 million, I think it was, for a 10-year package. It's probably now worth 450, given what the shares have done. So it's if you look at what some of these technology firm websites have done, they break down an iPad. They looked at the iPad 2. It retails for $600. The supply assembly piece, which is really what these workers are sharing, is $10. So less than 2%.
It's such a tiny piece of what they're doing. I mean, but I mean, it's also
it's a tiny piece. But don't forget, an Apple, their brand is worth a huge amount. It's probably the company whose brand is the most valuable brand in the world right now. You can buy an iPod or you can buy a generic MP3 player and you pay about twice as much for the iPod. Same thing with a phone. I mean, you pay a lot.
So there's an argument to be made that not like trying to raise wages. There is something good for shareholders in the reputational value.
There's two things. It's a risk for Apple because you don't want people saying, well, do I really want to buy that item because they don't treat their workers
and there is
well.
Anecdotal evidence that at least some people have taken stuff back to the shop.
Mm-hmm. Have they gotten out in front of this well enough? I mean, they are doing quite a bit of talking, working on this.
It's not like Apple never did anything about this. They've thought about environmental sustainability before for several years. They've thought about workers before. The problem is this is a really difficult issue to deal with. It's expensive. You have to do it on the ground. It's no good in the end just saying, Mr. Foxconn, you have to behave in this way, because
which is part of what they're doing, is joining this group, the Fair Labor Association.
So they're joining the Fair Labor Association. They try to get engaged with education and things for workers on the ground. So it's not like they're not doing anything. Their problem is they need to do, clearly, I think, at the moment, clearly more than anybody else has to do.
Right. And the main problem is just the conditions in these countries are so awful. I mean, if you've been to a third world country, you know that people live on garbage dumps. So
the standards are not equal. You can't compare them, and it's hard to grasp the...
No, I mean, they probably should pay, should they pay workers more? Sure. It wouldn't, it'd do wonders for their reputation. It's good for the people living in those countries, too.
Right.
But, as it is, these workers are already pretty fortunate to have these jobs, and you have to keep that in mind as well.
Right, but then again, this is the difficulty. I mean, without being too relativist about it, you have to stick to local labor laws and whatever additional standards Apple or other people choose to impose, and if you don't, you have to figure out if suppliers don't, you have to figure out how to try to make them.
All right, we'll leave it there. This issue will keep playing out. We'll be on the lookout for Apple's big announcement and be back with more breaking views tomorrow.